Is the Horizon Zero Dawn Netflix series canceled? Horizon Zero Dawn TV series no longer moving forward at Netflix. Netflix's ambitious Horizon Zero Dawn show is dead for now. So if you didn't already know, there's been a Netflix show confirmed for actually about 2 years now. Sony confirmed it back in 2022 during an investor call. So we know that it's been in the works. It was supposed to be at Netflix until about a week ago, we got some news that it's been canceled. So there's actually parts of this that I'm pretty happy about, but there's also parts that make me pretty concerned. So I want to talk about both sides of that coin. But first, let's just take a quick look at what happened here. So like I said, about 2 years ago, Sony did confirm they do want to make a Horizon show alongside some other game adaptations that we'll talk a little bit more about later. But since that initial announcement, we really have not learned much about this Horizon show. We know that they intended it to go to Netflix. We also learned soon after that Steve Blackman here was going to be the showrunner. He is the showrunner on Umbrella Academy, and it sounds like he's problematic, so we're going to talk a little bit more about Steve here. We did also learn in an interview with Blackman at one point that at least their plan for the show was for it to actually follow the story of Horizon Zero Dawn and presumably Forbidden West when they got to that point. So they said right here that Aloy would be the main character in the story, which I think pretty much confirms that it would follow in her timeline of what we play in the games. Now, I know people have heard the Horizon 2074 code name for the show that was sort of leaked at one point and thinking that maybe it was a prequel series during the old one's time and not actually following the story of Aloy's time. Even though the year 2074 didn't really make a lot of sense in the canon. Doesn't seem like that was supposed to be the case. According to this interview, they talk in multiple places about Horizon Zero Dawn's story, and again, that Aloy would be the main character. So it seems like the intent, at least, was to follow Aloy's story through Horizon Zero Dawn and presumably Forbidden West once they got there. But about 2 weeks ago, there was an article published on the Rolling Stone that Steve Blackman was being accused of bullying, toxic behavior, manipulative behavior, sexist behavior. This article is really long. I'll link it below if you want to check it out. But the overall gist is that not a great guy that you want to be working under, not somebody we would want running the Horizon show. I was actually really happy when I first saw this because I thought, oh, nice, we've dodged a bullet there. We don't want this guy running the show. Maybe they'll just replace him with someone better since it sounds like the show hasn't gotten terribly far along anyway, and then we'll all be better off. But then about a week after she published this article, Cheyenne Roundtree, who's the author of it, tweeted that the Rolling Stone learned that Horizon Zero Dawn and the original series Orbital that he was also working on are no longer moving forward. Now, she hasn't provided any clarity on this. I actually tweeted along with a bunch of other people asking for clarity, and she has not replied to any of us. And it's actually also worth noting that she updated this article about 3 times since she originally published it. So when I originally read this, there was no mention of Horizon Zero Dawn being canceled in it. And then after she tweeted, she had updated the article to say that the show was no longer moving forward with Blackman specifically. And then at some point, a few days later, she updated again to say what it says now, which is that the 2 projects are no longer moving forward more definitively. So there's really not a lot of other information on this right now. It doesn't seem like anybody's really corroborated this. I think it's also important to note that Sony, Guerrilla, PlayStation Studios, no one who has first-party knowledge of this show has commented on this. So we're only going off of this one article from the Rolling Stone, although it does seem very definitive and pretty well reported. If you go through the whole thing, it's pretty extensive again. The only other thing I was able to find on this is over in this Forbes article. They actually have a little update of their own that says, people with knowledge of the situation say that the status of the projects, including Horizon, is not linked to the recent reporting on Blackman. Now that's kind of interesting, for one, because it seems like Forbes is confirming that the shows are canceled from their own perspective, but it also is interesting that they're saying it's not linked to the reporting on Blackman. That may indicate that the shows were in trouble before all this came out about him, and this was kind of just the final straw, or that the shows being canceled are kind of coming out now because of the stuff about Blackman. So not really totally clear what's going on. I would love to get some more reporting on this from reputable sources, but regardless, it sounds like the Horizon show is definitely in trouble. So here's what I think about all this. I'm happy that Blackman is off the show. I was hoping he would be kicked off after I saw that initial article about him being toxic, manipulative, sexist, all these things. Definitely sounds like a bad actor. Definitely sounds like somebody we would not want running any show, let alone the Horizon show of all things. So I definitely wanted him to be kicked off. Sounds like that happened. Also sounds like the show was canceled though, which I'm not happy about. I actually really want this show. I think it could be done well. I think it would be awesome if it was done well. I'm not as concerned as other people are about it being a live action, although I do hear people's concerns. It's definitely going to need a big budget to have the machines in there even part of the time, although I think there are good examples of where you can have interesting mythical creatures like dragons and things. Take Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon. You don't have to have the dragons in every episode for the show to be good. I think that would be true for a Horizon show as well. We just wouldn't have machines in every shot, in every episode. They would be there when they're needed, and then they would just not be there when they're not. And we would focus on relationships between people, interactions between people. And we have so many compelling human characters in Horizon. Aloy, obviously, Sylens, Rost, all the Nora, Varl, Sona, the Banuk. There's tons of human characters where we wouldn't necessarily need the machines in every episode. But there is no doubt that a live action show would have to be high budget, and it's kind of a high risk, high reward thing. I also hear people's concerns about retelling the story of Zero Dawn and potentially messing it up. Although I'm personally of the opinion that even if they totally screw up a show, whoever does it, it doesn't change the games. And so you can always go back to the original source material, the original games, and enjoy them. And I don't think the show going badly would ruin the games for me. For example, again, Game of Thrones. Whatever you thought about how that series ended up, I did not like how it ended. It did not ruin the books for me. The books are still their own thing. They're still the original story, and I still love them. But regardless of what you think about a Horizon show, what it should be, what it could be, what you'd want it to be, if you think it could be done well, I don't think it's dead. I don't think Sony's giving up on this. They've made it pretty clear that they have a very intentional strategy to turn their biggest IPs into multimedia franchises. So take their games, turn them into movies and shows. They're doing this with much more than just Horizon. They've obviously successfully done this with The Last of Us on HBO, which has been massively successful. Even though Uncharted, the movie, got mixed reviews, it actually was very financially successful. It only cost like $120 million to make, and they've made over $400 million on it. And then they actually have a number of other projects in the works that a lot of people aren't aware of. There's a Ghost of Tsushima movie that's been in production for about 2 years with the director of the John Wick's movies. There's a God of War show that's been in production with Amazon Prime for about 1.5 years or 2. And then they've also got some stuff going on with Gran Turismo and I think Twisted Metal as well at like Peacock or something like that. So with all of these other projects in the works and seemingly going well, I don't think it's likely that they're just going to give up on the Horizon show because it hasn't worked out with Netflix. Again, going back to The Last of Us show, they confirmed that every time an episode of that dropped on HBO, the game sales spiked. The same thing happened with Fallout. Now, Fallout's not a Sony or PlayStation title, but it's another great example where when that show aired on Netflix, the sales of the Fallout games just went pretty wild for a few weeks. So there's at least a few really good examples of game adaptations for shows and movies working out really well. And I think that's very strong evidence for Sony to say, yes, this is a good strategy. We're going to keep pushing forward with this. So I just don't see them giving up on the Horizon show that easily when it's one of their biggest franchises. So the big question, of course, is what happens with the show now? And I think there's 3 broad possibilities. One is that it actually could just be dead or caught in limbo for a very long time. I think there is a big unanswered question here about who actually owns the rights to the TV series. Is that Sony still, and they're just licensing it to Netflix, or did Netflix actually buy those rights? And if Netflix owns them, are they willing to sell them off or sell them back to Sony? That's something we just don't know. And if Netflix does own those rights and is unwilling to give them up, then it could be caught in limbo indefinitely. I think that's pretty unlikely though. Again, I just think Sony is pushing really hard to take their tentpole gaming franchises and make them multimedia franchises. So if Netflix has the rights, I would think Sony would try to get them back or negotiate for Netflix to sell them to another streaming platform. I think the second possibility is that Netflix revitalizes this effort somehow with a different showrunner, although that also seems very unlikely based on what we're seeing in the little bit of reporting that we have right now. And then the third possibility, which in my opinion opinion is actually a really exciting possibility is that the show moves forward at a different platform other than Netflix. So that's actually what I'm hoping for. I was never super enthusiastic about the Horizon show going to Netflix in the first place, although I was definitely trying to be optimistic and remain hopeful that they could do a good job with it. And I think it's still possible that they could have done a good job with it. They obviously have a lot of money they could throw at it, but I'm definitely excited for it to be in another streaming platform's hands. HBO would be my vote. Obviously, they have a ton of premium content and they did a fantastic job with the Last of Us series, but I would also be cool with it going to Amazon. I think they did a really good job with the Fallout series. I also really liked what they did with the Wheel of Time series and Rings of Power. And like I said before, they already have a God of War show in progress at Amazon, so they already have that relationship. Of course, they also have The Last of Us on HBO, so they have that relationship there as well. And I do think those are the two most likely options at this point for the Horizon show, either HBO or Amazon Prime. So it's definitely a bummer that the show's facing this setback. I think it's definitely going to come out later than whenever it was originally planned for, but I'm happy that this Blackman guy's off it. I'm happy that Netflix isn't going to handle it anymore. At least that's what it looks like. And I'm excited for the idea that it could go to HBO or Amazon, where I think it's more likely to be done well. Again, I doubt it's totally canceled, so I hope we get some more news on it relatively soon and find out what the plan is. And I also hope we find out more about the other Horizon projects, like the Horizon multiplayer game that we know is in development. We actually know more about that Horizon multiplayer game than you'd think, and I'm putting all those bits of info together in a video for you pretty soon. So I'll stick that up right here when it's ready. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you over there in just a second.